Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Boris Yatsenko. I'm a partner at Ernst & Young. I work in the Moscow office, and I'm responsible for mining sector in Russia and CIS. In my today's presentation, I'm going to focus on fundraising for mining projects. I'm going to talk about mining industry in general. Gold mining will be a specific subject that I will try to spend some time on. I'm going to start by talking about the global market so that you understand the overall market trends, what people do to raise funding for mining projects, and then I will talk about Russia specifically. Now, the world trends in fundraising. Let's first do an overview of commodity markets. This curve shows you price dynamics in US dollars for different commodities. You can see the following thing. There are two phases for all commodities. First period is between 2012 and 2016, when prices were going down, and then in the second half of 2016, we have seen prices recovery on most commodities. You can see, though, that the level of 2012 has not been achieved in all categories. In gold, we are not there yet in US dollar prices. An interesting thing, we see a lot of similarities in different commodities. However, the reasons that have impacted commodity prices in recent years have been different. Look at coal, gold, industrial metals. Our analysis shows that there are factors specific to each commodity that play the biggest role compared to overall macroeconomic factors. Now, on the subject of fundraising, you can see in this slide some statistics from different sources. We have looked at a number of databases and brought together information on a number of public deals. Non-public transactions have not been included in this review. Here you can see data on some of the most significant deals. What's interesting here, the most important sources of funding in 2016 were share issuance. Look at the dynamics. Equity in 2016 compared to 2015. Equity capital has remained at the same level. In fixed income, we have seen a significant growth of 51% up to the level of $116 billion. And we have seen some decline in syndicated loans from 123 to 103 billion. Companies continue to optimize their operations, reduce their costs, improve performance, improve their balances. People do less in the way of expansion. Our expectation is that in 2017, companies will shift focus from reduction of leverage towards reduction of cost of borrowing. Commodity price increases have a positive impact on companies' books. So many companies will be able to get refinancing at better rates. Now, I'm going to show you a few charts with information on specific sources of funding. This is syndicated loans. 2016 has seen a decline in the number of deals. As you can see, the overall volume, though, has picked up somewhat. Banks are still cautious about this sector, and there are some negative expectations. That is when we compare mining industry to some other economy sectors. Improved cash flows and deleverage of operations opens an opportunity to refinance some of the expensive loans that companies have obtained in early 2010. Now, let us look at the bonds situation. Look at the dynamics. We see an increasing interest towards bond issuance. You see a growing number of issues, and also you see growth in overall value. 2016 has been a year when bonds have been the most popular facility. We have seen an increase of 51% increase. In gold mining sector, the biggest transaction was Tech Resources issuance of $1.25 million to refinance older debt. IPOs. You can see that the volume is not significant at all. We have seen only 15 IPOs in all of 2016 in mining industry. The overall volume was $122 million, which is a 65% decrease compared to 2015. We expect to see more of this business in 2017 because of the growing commodity prices and because of generally improving atmosphere. When we look at the biggest deals, the most important transaction was the one by Horizon Gold in Australia. They raised about $11.1 million, which brought the market cap to $23 million. Now let us look at the SPO business. The volume is much higher. In 2016, secondary placements amounted to 28 million. The expectation is that in 2017 we are going to see more of this business. In gold mining, Franco-Nevada has made the biggest transaction. It issued $920 million worth of equities. Now let us look at mergers and acquisitions. 2016 was not a great year. The volume came down by 9% to the level of $44.3 billion. Structure-wise, we can see that there's been a number of active industry investors, and we saw about 15% of financial investors that were involved in those transactions. In gold mining, the number of M&A went down by 20%, and the overall value was $11.1 billion US dollars. In the M&A domain, I guess most people will be interested in restructuring of their portfolios. As an example, I can name the biggest deal, that is an acquisition of 50% of PT Ammon Mineral International by Metco Energy International. The transaction was worth $2.6 billion. What kind of prospects does this market have? The market is still quite passive. IPO volume will continue to be low and insignificant. However, we are going to see more SPOs. Like I was saying earlier, the cash flows in many companies seem to stabilize, and this will help companies to deleverage, because they will be able to fund some operations through cash flows. We have seen some interest to the industry from strategic investment funds in Middle East. They can become a source of debt funding for the industry. Now let us look at the situation in Russia specifically. This chart gives you an idea of investment situation in major mining companies in Russia. 2014 was a big decline year. 2016 has seen a recovery back to the level of 6.8 billion, and we expect to see more recovery in 2017. This had to do with the depreciation of the Russian ruble. This was the biggest reason for that decline. As of the funding of mining operations, here is a big picture. We have looked at all major sources. And we see that since 2013, we have seen a twofold decline in the volume of funding. We know that some constraints have been imposed by the United States and by the EU that had to do with the availability of funding. In previous years, the industry has been borrowing quite a lot. Many companies have been selling their equity, selling shares. Several people did IPOs, and West European companies have been very active in this market. After sanctions have been imposed, the industry has lost a lot of volume. And we also see that today the industry gets funding mostly from Russian banks that are partially state-owned. As you can see from the numbers here, the interest rates are growing. That applies to both ruble-denominated and foreign exchange-denominated loans.
I already mentioned some external limitations. Unfortunately, currently it's hard to talk about lifting these limitations or sanctions. For the short-term prospects, Russian industry will have to live in this reality. And this reality leads us to some problems with financing, to a deficit of lending resources, and also the increase of interest rates. Here in the table, to illustrate my point, we mention several deals related to attracting financing before 2014 and after. This is not a complete list, but until 2014 we had some IPO deals where major loans were attracted from foreign banks, euro bonds were issued, and the current reality, many or most deals are connected with the state-run funds, for example, like the Far East Development Fund and subsidies issued by the Far Eastern Development Ministry, Ministry of Economic Development, and loans from state banks or otherwise, or deals otherwise connected with state-run banks. In a situation where we lack finances, more and more companies use non-conventional methods of financing, pre-export financing, off-take contract financing, credit loans covered by export credit agency, and using leasing. And in conclusion, some future prospects. Here we put together the consensus forecast for the commodity prices, showing all major commodities here. If we talk about gold, it is believed that until 2019, the price for gold will be more or less stable, around $1,300 per ounce. In consensus gives you a slight increase of that price, which will support investments into this field. Players are going to be more active because commodity prices are quite high. We analyzed using different multipliers the companies in the mining sector compared Russian and international companies. Russian companies have many advantages. Our multipliers are lower. For long-term investors, it makes sense to invest into Russian mining companies. And if we talk about gold, Russian gold miners are the leaders in terms of cost of production and unsustainable cost. Here we look quite attractive for foreign investors.